Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. We do this program every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and this week even Friday, around 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. The point of the show is to have our thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing amazing work in the world. We have them on the program so that we can all learn from them. We can learn their best habits, their secrets to success that can help us be better at what we do. Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. I'm just having all kinds of technical difficulties today. But anyway, the point of the show is to learn from our guests and learn what they do that can help us be better. But the fun part about it is that it can be interactive. So if you ask questions, we can get to them on the air, and you can learn what you want to learn right then and there. So if you like the program, give it a like or share so that not only do we grow and our audience grows, your network can benefit from these conversations as well. Now, we are simulcasting on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all with the help of Social Live. Now, today, this is going to be a fun conversation. So stay tuned because I've got Tracy Timm on the program today. She is an author. She's a career strategist, a career strategy expert. She is founder of the Ninth Degree Career Academy. We're going to talk about that today. Her book is Seven Fast Start Strategies for starting something new. What to do when you don't know what to do. I like that. I love that. And actually, that's my first question because we all get to that point, right, Tracy?
Unfortunately, yeah. That is the most frequent question I think I hear is just like, what the heck is step one? So I hear you.
No, I think we all get to the point where we know we have to do something, right? But I know I've been there. I remember probably 15 or 16 years ago, I was in a job that I should have loved, but I didn't. And I knew in my gut that I needed to do something, but I had no idea what that was. And I didn't know where to go with that, right? So how do you, how do you find that the thing that you're supposed to be doing?
It's the $64 million question, right? It's the reason that my business exists and the reason that I get to keep doing what I'm doing is that it's not obvious.
Right.
If you want to, there are careers in my experience so far as a strategy and clarity expert. There are careers that are very clear. They're almost, I call them career conveyor belts. Like you get on and this is step one and you're going to do that for a couple of years. And this is step two and you're going to do that for a couple of years. And you can see the progression, right? You can see it through to its eventual climax, if you will, of now I'm the CEO and I have the corner office and whatever. But for the majority of us, especially in today's world where businesses are no longer as loyal as they used to be, and we can't necessarily count on things like our loyalty mattering long term. And given the fact that I heard somewhere recently that actually half of the jobs that children who are 10 or younger will eventually have when they're 18 or older don't even exist yet. Meaning, How can we tell them to prepare for, becoming a underwater basket weaver when underwater basket weaver doesn't even exist? We don't know. It doesn't even have a title yet, let alone a set of requirements and things that you need to have accomplished prior to doing it. So when you look out at this expansive world of what's possible in today's career marketplace, it can be so incredibly overwhelming for people. And I think that's the first thing that puts paralysis in the way of us moving forward is, man, if it was 50, even 100 years ago, you had like 3 or 5 options, right? You could be a farmer, you could maybe work in a factory, you could, for women, be a mom, and that was pretty much it. So it just, to me, that first thing, getting over and through the overwhelm, and there's some pretty specific ways to do that.
How?
Yeah. That's the natural next question, isn't it? So I think the reason that we're overwhelmed primarily, and this is something that we really hammer home in our practice and specifically in the nth degree process itself, is we are entertaining too many options at any given time. So we have to find a mechanism that helps us reduce the number of options so that our decision-making process is simpler. Otherwise, we're going to be in that paralysis, analysis, overwhelm, churn constantly.
Right.
So the way that I like to equate this for people with just an analogy is imagine you're a 17-year-old boy and your mom has asked you to go to the grocery store to pick up a couple things. And one of the things on the list is peanut butter. Now, I don't know if you've been to like just even an average grocery store recently, let alone like a Whole Foods or a Central Market or whatever. But peanut butter is so broad of a spectrum now that it has like its own eye, right?
Yeah.
There's a bazillion choices, and then there's a bazillion different denominations of peanut butter, right? You've got all the different nut butters, and then you've got organic or not, natural or not, salt or not, roasted or not. Like there's so many. So if the only thing that your list says is peanut butter, well then you have no way of evaluating all of your choices, right? But if that list said all natural, organic, crunchy, non-roasted, no salt added almond butter, well then that poor kid is going to be able to go, oh, it's one of these 3 jars, or maybe it's this is the only jar, right? So we need a mechanism to do that in our professional lives as well, to know so specifically what is right for us, what moves the needle for us, that as we're looking out into the career marketplace, we can go, oh, it's definitely not this, it's definitely not this, it's definitely not that. Ugh, like dodge bullet. It's these 3 to 5 viable choices. And I know if you're listening to this and you're like, I wish I had that, you're going, well, if I had that, I would be doing it, right? I think we entertain more than is really vital for us because we forget to define what's important to us first. So we were all taught, right, through no fault of anybody's, that you need a job first and foremost. You have to work, you have to make money, right? And then there's certain numbers salary-wise that are impressive or not impressive, or worth doing or not doing, right? Then there's you need benefits, you've got to have healthcare, you've got to have dental, or you can't go without that. And then you need a certain amount of time off because you're going to hate your job, so you're going to want to take vacation. Like there are all these things that we're told to look for that we put ahead of, is my personality right for this environment? Is this subject matter something that I find inherently interesting? Is there sustainability in this job? Meaning maybe, yes, I could do it for a year or 2 years and just leg it out, but can I do it for 10 or 20 or 30? We put those questions off and we put the other set of values or priorities first, when those are not things that make a job work for us, right? Those are just the external metrics or markers of success that someone taught you somewhere down the line that don't impact your actual enjoyment, fulfillment, longevity of your career. They just don't. They're very
2 weeks off doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
And what's really frustrating about this too, and Rhett, this, right? Like I tell people this all the time. I'm like, until you've had a job where you were so miserable that no matter how much you got paid, it wouldn't change how you felt about that job, you can't tell somebody that. You know what I mean? You can't tell somebody making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 that making 100 isn't going to make them happier. No. Because
Amen to that.
It's not going to fundamentally change the job. It'll make your life a little bit easier for 6 months, a year, but you're going to find that the unsustainability of a job you hate is always going to outweigh how much you're getting paid to do it. And unfortunately, that is what we allow to take precedent, as opposed to, do I come home with energy? Am I a good spouse? Am I proud of my parenting? Am I a good member of my community? Do I contribute any value at work? Do I get any fulfillment out of the work that I do? We settle.
Well, I mean, from the the psychology side of things, right? The impact that has on you physically, it has impact on you emotionally. It has, So yeah, all those things that you think that that extra paycheck is worth, really in the long run aren't.
Yeah. And again, you can't tell somebody that until they've lived it. And that's one of the
Yeah,
frustrations of my business is like you've got to be at the point of real misery, I think, to make change. And we know
right,
from human psychology that we only move away from pain or towards pleasure. So you have to be experiencing enough pain to be motivated to make a change or have such an awesome, juicy potential outcome that you can't not pursue it, right? You can't live in the
right,
middle and think that anything about your life is going to change for the better. So the way that we go about doing this, because I think that this is really where your question started, is we've got to figure out first and foremost what we value as an individual, and you have to allow yourself to live by those values as your priorities, as your commitments, as opposed to what society will tell you you should value, which are the external markers of success.
right,
And that it sounds really like lame or cheesy or, oh, I need to know my core values. But the reality is the reason you hate your job is because you're living out of alignment with what really matters to you. Right. The reason that I
right.
hated my job on Wall Street was not because Wall Street is stressful, was not because Tracy like can't do finance. It wasn't because I'm not a hard worker. It was a fish trying to climb a tree and calling itself stupid. You know, like thank you, Einstein.
I love
That's
that.
just the reality of what it was every single day. And more so, it wasn't allowing me to live and express any values that were really important to me. So I was having to live in constant cognitive dissonance because we'd have to do something like semi shady or, you know,
Right,
something that I didn't jive with necessarily. And not that we were like breaking laws or anything, but just icky
right.
stuff, you know?
Icky. Yeah,
and and you just have to be okay with it because this is your job, this is what you have to do. Well, if that doesn't align with your core values, then your body and your mind are living out of alignment. And so guess what changes? It's not usually your body, it's usually
yeah,
your mind, right? It's usually we alter our beliefs, we explain things away in order to justify what we're physically doing in the world. And this is how good people go about making bad decisions, right?
right,
So I think first and foremost, to figure out your jar of peanut butter, you've got to figure out what your standards are for peanut butter. So in this case, like when you think about what you value in your life and what gives you joy and where you find fulfillment and what you're doing when you're in the flow and just truly like what you value, get
right,
that out on paper and start to think about what are some standards by which I could see myself living each of these values, and not the standards within your current reality, but the standards that would dictate an ideal life.
okay, yep,
Right. So if you're a mom, so I'm working with, I'm hoping that she's going to join our program. This woman who's a mom of two, and she has two dependent parents actually, and she's a single
okay,
mom. So she's working her tail off and not getting paid enough, and not doesn't have enough. At the end of the day, she's like, I barely have enough energy to take care of my kids, and I have my dependent parents, and I barely have enough money to feed everybody. She's making ends meet, right? One of the things that is value driven for her is having quality time with her children. That is just this core value that if she could be being paid $1 million, but if her kids were being raised by nannies and she never got to see them, that would not be a good exchange for her, right? That would
right,
not jive with her values. So one of the things I told her was early on, one of the standards we're going to have to set for work that is viable for you is that it doesn't require you to physically be in an environment at any time that you don't choose. Meaning you have
yeah,
remote freedom, flexibility, what have you, and never in history have we had more opportunities to add value without having to physically be present somewhere, right?
right.
And for her it was just this huge leap. She's like, you mean but won't I get paid less? Won't somebody not want to hire me because that's a standard that I have? Won't limit, right? The reality is if you can explain how you add value so deeply that even though you're not physically present, the company is going to benefit from having you, guess what? I'm hiring you. Like you're on the
Absolutely,
team. You know what I
no
mean?
doubt, no
That
doubt.
that's the difference. And we allow other people, I think, in that moment to dictate our value, when if you're clear on what it is going into that conversation, then having a standard around wanting remote work isn't a deal breaker. And it's not you asking for too much or being what's the word that people tell me all the time? They're like, I don't want to be a burden, or I don't want to like
overreach. I don't want to. I
I
don't want to.
don't want my employer to be like, oh, she's going to be like, I have to go with my kids and I have to do this or that or whatever, right? Like they're
You want to
worried.
be accommodating, right? You want to be, yeah.
Oh, I'll work on the weekends. I'll do this. I'll do that. If it's not sustainable, it's not viable. So that's where I would start. If you feel out of alignment for whatever reason, it's likely values driven. So force yourself to figure out your core values and then look objectively at your job and ask yourself, where, if you have a value of integrity and your job is requiring you to like on some contracts or look the other way when our top client is doing whatever they want to do, right? Then you're living out of alignment with something that is core to your being. And the way that we're wired physically as humans just will not allow you to sustain that for a very long period of time. Could you do it in the interim to make it to your bonus and like exit with grace? Like maybe, but is it going to be your life's work? Is it going to be something you're proud to tell your children about? Is it going to be something that gives you energy at the end of the day? Probably not. And to me, those standards are just more important. Like, I don't know about you, you're a business owner, right? Like you sold a business and you ran your own thing for a long time. I feel like there are the Gary V's of the world, and there's nothing wrong with Gary V. He's awesome. But they're preaching, put your head down, work from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m., suck it up, and then 10 years in the future, you can pull your head up and go, look what I've created. This is an amazing life. Well, I never wanted to live like that. I wanted to enjoy the bridge that I was walking over while I was walking over it. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to enjoy the life that I was living while building the fullest expression of the life that I really want. And I don't think that's too much to ask. And what it requires is that you get crystal clear on what does matter to you, so that when you do have to make sacrifices, which you will, you don't have to sacrifice anything that's like in your top 5. You know what I mean? So like the easiest thing in my business, and I want to get back to, what I feel like I've just been on a soliloquy, but I'm digging in.
You're good.
The easiest thing that I relate this to in my business is when you're an entrepreneur, everybody's talking about speed, right? Like how fast are you growing? How many people have you added? How many clients? And it's speed. To me, speed didn't matter. What mattered more was that I get time with my mom and my dad. What mattered more was that I had space for dating. What mattered more was that I had self-care, and that I had sustainability, and that I had physical and locational freedom. So when I thought about building my business and I thought about having this bridge that I enjoyed walking over, my bridge, what I had to give on was time. Right? If I'm not willing to do the Gary Vee thing and work 18-hour days for 2 years to have this business be a thing in 2 years, then I have to be okay with the fact that my business is going to be there in 5 or 4, right? Instead of 2. And that's a sacrifice, but it was one that I was totally willing to make, and I made it intentionally. And that's the difference. I think that we don't think long term, right? Like, isn't it? I wonder if I think it's Bill Gates who said, right? Like we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10. The same is true for a day. I consistently overestimate what I can accomplish in a day, but I underestimate what's possible in a year's time. I just think we need to extend the lens a little bit and think, this might be working for me right now, but is there sustainability? Is there longevity? Is this viable for me for a life that I want, or do I need to think about making a change? Yeah.
No, I like the way you design your life, right? And I think that's the key to me is having the courage to, number one, figure that out, and then to make that change. I talk to so many people in my coaching who put their head down and really cut. They turn off that other side of them that wants to do this or that, right? and they're getting a good paycheck here, and they turn that side of them off. And so after a period of time, I think that part of you can just become numb. And it anyway, I don't want to talk about that because.
And there's nothing wrong if those are your values, if you're like, listen, for the next 6 months, for the next year, I am just going to go all in. This is going to be what I focus on. So I'm not going to say yes to, this really long vacation. I'm not going to say yes to this or that other opportunity. This is what I'm going to own. There is nothing wrong with that if you're doing it intentionally and proactively, right? If you've made the plan in your mind's eye and this is values driven and it has a purpose. But just to do that because, some influencer said this is what hardworking people do, or, somebody's giving you a hard time because you're not up until midnight working on your startup, like, that's a load of crap to me. Like, I don't want to work more than 40, 45 hours a week. Like, I want to go home and like hang out with my cats, and I want to like go out on the weekends, and I want to date, and I want to be with my friends. I want to spend a ton of time with my mom and I are freakishly linked to each other. Like, I want to live a life that I enjoy and grow something that I believe in. And that's my value. It doesn't have to be yours.
No, but I think that we often give up, as you were talking about. I think we often bury those things for the paycheck and for and I think that's kind of sad. Why do we let fear and self-doubt kind of rule our choices, you think?
Ooh, man, if the other question wasn't the $64 million question, this is the one. So, when I talk about fear, I lean a lot.
Security? Do we get wrapped up in security, or maybe a?
Well, yes, totally. So at its core, fear is a biological and physiological and chemical hardwiring that we have as human beings. Like, to think about it as something else is to not understand our own biology. So if we start with that, then we have to understand that any time in our lives that something is scary, we're going to have the same physical and visceral reaction to it. Meaning 10,000 years ago, a saber-toothed tiger is producing the same experience that is produced in your mind when you're afraid to leave a job you don't like, or you're afraid to say, I love you, right? Or you're afraid to sit down and write that book that's been on your mind forever. And I borrow a lot of this thinking and this terminology from Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Big Magic, which is about creativity and what limits our creativity.
I had her on the program a couple months ago. Yeah.
Did you really?
I did.
That's amazing. I would love to talk to her. Oh my God. I would buy her.
We had a great
all the wine, and we would just
we had a hours. Wonderful talk for about an hour. We really had a wonderful talk.
That's incredible. So I borrow a lot of my commentary around fear and that sort of thing from her, because in that book she talks about how it's, quote, always and only fear that keeps us from doing the things that we want to do, especially as it relates to putting something creative or different or countercultural out in the world, because that could harm not only our sense of self, but in the past, if you didn't jive with what society was doing, you weren't a part of the society, right? Like, you got left out in the woods, and it's a lot harder to protect yourself from a saber-toothed tiger alone than it is, from with a group of people around you. And so, of course, I think it's self-preservation at the end of the day. Like, we don't want to divert from the norm or challenge our limiting beliefs or external expectations, because it's what keeps us safe, both biologically and mentally, right?
Yeah.
And, at some point, though, I think, and there's a great quote, and it's often like misattributed, and so I don't know who said it, but the sentiment is that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the decision that something else is more important. So basically, like, you feel the fear and you do it anyway. That's courage. That's bravery. And so, if you're scared, just realize that, like, that's a normal reaction, and that it's not going anywhere. But if you allow fear to dictate your decisions, you're letting fear sit in the driver's seat and play with all the controls and the navigation and the radio station. You're not in control of your own life anymore, you know? And she says, put the fear in the back seat or the passenger seat and don't let it touch the dials. Like, acknowledge that it's not going anywhere.
You can look at it. You can look at it over your shoulder.
Yep. They don't even get the radio, right? They don't get to influence like anything about the drive. But to think that like you're going to overcome fear completely or that fear is going to go away is just inaccurate, right? So we've got to acknowledge that it's going to show up, and we've got to have mechanisms at the ready to put it in its place, you know?
What is the nth degree program that you have, the 5-step clarity strategy?
Yeah. So the nth degree is my humble attempt at creating a methodology or a strategy that is replicable, that people can follow if they are stuck and confused and overwhelmed and staring at a career version of a wall of peanut butter and don't know where to start. And I created it because my first job out of college I hated. I spent 2.5 years working on Wall Street and was miserable, and for many reasons. And so I remember that the thing that was keeping me stuck was that I didn't know what I wanted to do. Right. It was like, I would run out of the front door tomorrow. I just don't know where I'm going. And so in the absence of a goal, I'm just going to stay here and like wait it out. And the mindset was like, maybe something will appear, you know, like maybe I'll have one of the serendipitous moments of clarity. And like, yeah, if that's where you're at right now, please call me, because like it's not going to happen. It's just not like you're not going to have your dream job fall into your lap off of scrolling on a job board. If you do, you're the exception. You're not the rule. So I called up my college, my university, and I just asked them, you know, I don't need a resume rewrite. I don't need a cover letter. I don't need an introduction. I know half of the things you're about to offer me, what I need is clarity. What I need is a strategy, a plan of execution, not to get a new job, but to figure out what the hell I want to do in the first place. And, you know, I was shocked to find that they didn't have anything. They didn't have a program that they represented or a book to recommend or anything. They had counselors who you could talk to, but like, that was about it. It wasn't very directed, if you will, right? It was just kind of like, you might discover something, you might not. Like, there was no promise.
Here's our catalog here's our,
There was no promise of success if you did the work, right? It was just show up and maybe it'll work. And I hated that. I was like, somebody's got to have figured this out. And if not, maybe I could, because the reality was there's so many people out there suffering through jobs that they hate when they have so much more potential to give to the world. Like that's the shift in the pendulum, you know, of thinking, if you will, that like, we're not just talking about like, oh, it sucks. Like this is a privileged problem. This is a first world problem to hate your job. Like you can look at it that way. The way I choose to look at it is there are all these people who are taking their God-given potential and their purpose for being in this world, and they're hiding it in these miserable jobs. Right. And if we could have a mechanism for them to discover themselves, discover their real value, to define their ideal career and profession, and then to drive their career to get back in the driver's seat and take control and drive it like a pro, those people could have an insane impact on the rest of the world. You know, the ripple effects of them being in the right place, doing the right thing for them are unknowable. And the world will be less well off for them for not having it, you know? So the nth degree came about both as a product of my own personal professional discovery process, and then the first 3 years that I was in business for myself. So I am just starting now year 6. So we just celebrated 5 years. The first 3 years in business, I did all one-on-one coaching, a ton of market research and R&D. And then I actually worked with a behavioral assessment called the Predictive Index, which I still represent and use today, to implement that within companies so that I could better understand, you know, who gets hired and why do some people work out in some roles and others don't? And how do I articulate my nature as a professional, as a career value add, you know, as an asset, as opposed to just an an employee, and let alone a liability, right? Because
Right.
this human in a Wall Street setting, not super useful. In a plant setting, I would be a total liability, like a bull in a china shop. Doing what I do now, it's massively valuable. It's strength, right? It's positive. And there's that whole spectrum of of job fit where, you know, you're a great fit and it adds value, and you're a horrible fit and you detract value, and then everything in the middle, right? So so the nth degree, it's actually now expanded to 7 steps. What happened over that 3 years was that by the end of year 3, I was realizing that I was doing about the same thing with each of my private, like, individual coaching clients. And that's when I knew I was on to something. So I codified the nth degree. I gave it, you know, a name, created a contextual model with some really incredible speakers and influencers who helped along the way. And then started putting it out into the world in programmatic format. So we have a digital program, we have a guided coaching program, we do live events, workshops, seminars, all that kind of stuff. And so now the nth degree is 7 steps, and we call it the 7 steps to take your career from stuck to unstoppable. They can really be most easily understood in 3 phases. So phase 1 we call discover. And in the discover phase, we're trying to discover your true value. So that comes not only in what you value, which we've talked about already, but how you add value, right, as a professional. And how we add value can come naturally because of our personality, our gifts, our talents. It can also come from what I call your nurture, which is step 3 in the process. And your nurture is just everything that I say that you put in that God left out, right? So it's like all of your experiences, your knowledge, your expertise, your skills that don't necessarily come naturally, but you're proficient at doing, and you want to bring with you. You want to go deeper, right? So once we have your now, your nature, and your nurture, that's the discover phase. And then we go right into the define phase. And in define, we're trying to define your unique professional niche. And that should be so unique to you and so powerful that you go from an employee to an asset. Because instead of just living in what you could do or how you fit in a set of requirements that already exist, we're identifying what's your Olympic gold medal level profession, like that you're now your nature,
you are unstoppable, right?
Yeah, you're unrivaled. That's the cool part, because then you can go into like a networking conversation, interviews, you name it, and instead of saying, yeah, I'm looking for a job in like blah 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 field or whatever, you can enumerate exactly how you add value. And for a lot of us, that's even, hey, here's how you draw that to the bottom line. Here's what it's worth economically. And when you speak like that, freaking hell, like companies will drool over you because they have so many people that are applying for jobs that just want their benefits. Like,
that's astounding. That's a way different conversation with a hiring manager, right? I mean, when you go in there armed with that, like when you can answer those questions and you talk about what value you bring. I mean, I don't know how many interviews I've sat in where I ask a question, what do you bring to the table? And it's, you get this kind of blank stare.
Well, here's my resume and here's all the things I've done. Well, I don't give a crap about that unless you can tell me how that adds value. And now as a business owner, I'm going, how am I going to afford you? Like, what do you bring to the table such that you create?
How are you generating revenue
to substantiate what I pay you? Like, that's, especially when you're early stage, like I barely pay myself, I just implemented last year profit first. So thank you, Mike McAllowitz. I actually do pay myself well now, but before that, you're like, you're reinvesting in the business and you're doing that sort of thing. And so when you bring on person number 1, which I've done, which has been an amazing thing, you've got to figure out, like, how do I justify X grand, a month or a year or whatever, based on the value that person's bringing to the table, what they take off your plate, what they add to the line, how they generate business, all that stuff. So if you can talk like that, because you're so in tune with your genius zone, your niche as a professional, then the game changes in your favor and it puts you back in the driver's seat, which is why the last phase is driving your career like a pro. And it's 3 steps called network, navigate, and nourish that we use to teach people the strategies that actually accelerate careers forward in today's marketplace, right? So if you are vying for that organic, all natural, crunchy, raw almond butter, right? That you're the one that gets picked. You know what I mean? That you are the one that actually gets that jar. And so those 3 strategies are really crucial to the process as well. Because basically the first half is going to be the first third is the discovery, and then the second third is that definition. So the knowing piece. The last third is how you're going to take that vision and turn it into your reality.
Do you help them understand or put it on paper as well, and sort of retool their presence and how they're presenting it? Because you got to get in the door first, right?
Exactly, which is all part of that network and navigate piece. It's like, how are you creating career advocates on purpose? Who are you talking to, and what are you saying to them specifically to drive the process forward? Because if you look at the data, and this is fascinating because I found this on, I think, LinkedIn, and it was a Business Insider article or NPR or something. 75 to 80% of jobs in today's marketplace are secured through strategic networking.
That makes
sense. The majority of those jobs are never even posted. Never even posted.
I wouldn't doubt that.
Which means, like, if you're on LinkedIn, and I love LinkedIn, I'm not naysaying like job postings. If you're on Indeed, again, not saying Indeed because it's useful at the stage of the process, but probably not before you have clarity. You know, if you're scrolling and just hoping that your dream job's going to pop out, recognize that mathematically you're looking at maximum 20% of what's out there. 20%.
Right, and you're also they're also posting it because they have to post it, and they've already probably got somebody in mind.
Yes, right? Because who in their right mind is going out there and especially if you're an established business, you've got applicants asked, right, who are still like hammering down your door, who want to be there. I mean, goodness gracious, it just drives me nuts. And so if the majority of the world is playing that game, but the majority of the jobs are over here in networking land, well, then let's get you out there with a pitch and a self-promotion strategy that you feel really confident in and you can execute, you know, so so you're saying the right things to the right people at the right time. So yeah, we're big on preparing people almost with like a pitch, like a script. You know, how are you going to enroll somebody in your career journey? And what are you going to say to them about your transition? And then how are you going to describe your vision for the future? And what specifically, if you could only get one thing out of that conversation, what do you need to progress this process forward? You know, so yeah, I will say, if you're out there and you're watching this and you're like, I wish Tracy could redo my resume, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm not your girl.
No, because
yeah.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I think the landscape it's remarkable today, the opportunity to network on a platform like LinkedIn and be able to reach out to people that you never would have been able to reach out to in the past, right? Like that you never would have had an opportunity to meet and create relationships with and create opportunities with. I mean, I think it opens up so much more opportunity for you, and many more opportunities that you would never have thought about, things that you've never been able to think about. And so, you know, I just think it's an incredible landscape now.
Yeah. And the power to me of LinkedIn is, yes, you have access, but it's the connectivity of people. It's the fact that I can see, if I want to talk to this person, then maybe I should go through this person who I have a great relationship with, who knows that person. And now I have a warm introduction to somebody who I never thought, like, you know, it's nearly impossible to know the 6 degrees of everybody in your network. But if you've got a network plugged in and is participating in an online platform like LinkedIn, then you're 1, maybe 2 people away from your dream job at any given time, right? The only thing standing in the way is A, knowing what that job is, right? And then B, having the confidence and the wherewithal to reach out and to not feel like you're a burden, not feel like you're bothering people, not feel like you're asking for too much, but truly to leverage the power of people to get where you want to go faster. And guess what? People want to help you. Like there's nobody in your network going, I'm hoping Tracy will call me today so I can, bash her head in and say, no, I don't want to help you. Like if people are in your universe, you don't have to start by going for like the Elizabeth Gilberts of the world if you want to interview great people. Like you can start with the people and then you get them to introduce you to people they know, who introduce you to people they know, and then you're 6 degrees away from anybody in the world, right?
Yep.
So that's my philosophy on the whole thing. Sorry, I went
and that's amazing what you get when you ask. It really is.
Oh,
it really is.
Yeah.
What is you also work with companies to create better environments and better cultures, and I want to talk about that a little bit. What is your platinum levers of loyalty? What does that mean?
Oh, okay. So I did when I started my business 5 years ago. I was primarily what we called at the time a human capital advisor. So I took predictive index and I would implement it in companies, and then I would help them do everything from hire to retire better. So streamlining the hiring process, making sure that you're actually investigating if people are a good fit for your environment or not based on their behavioral preferences. Meaning if you're a plant environment, you don't want to hire a Tracy unless she's going to be overseeing people and not touching stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's your best bet for success. So to me, the platinum levers of loyalty are that a while back, I was sort of turned on to not the golden rule, but the platinum rule. The golden rule being treat others as you want to be treated, which assumes that other people want to be treated the way that you do, which is not the case always, right? So the platinum levers of loyalty, the platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. So as a leader, if we want people to be loyal to us and to our organizations, then we have to give a shit about what they give a shit about, right? Like you have to know what they care about to such an extent that now they don't come to work just because they're coming for a paycheck or they're coming to make you happy. Right. They're coming for themselves, right? So if you can deeply understand the motivations, the values, the life circumstances, even, what's being asked of your employees on a day-to-day basis. And then if you can align those values with the values of the business and what the business wants to accomplish, right? So then we've got synergy. Then somebody's coming to work, yes, to do a good job and to do their job, but they're coming for themselves, and that requires a pretty strong amount of humility, because you have to realize as a business owner and a leader that you might not be somebody's end game. Like your job, the job that person does for you and with you might be their stepping stone to something different. I was going to say something greater, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just something different, right? And this is how they're going to get there. The only way for you to have 100% of that person's motivation and focus while they're with you is to know what that person's full trajectory in their mind is, and to show them how maximizing their potential in this little part of their career with you is going to get them there, right? Because then they're not just every day going, I can't wait until I'm not in this job anymore, because what I really want to be doing is that job. They're coming every day going,
and as a leader, you're okay with them using it that way, thinking of it that way.
Well, I think you kind of have to be, because isn't that just the reality? Like if you're lying to yourself and telling yourself every one of my employees is a lifer, then you're in for a world of hurt when somebody leaves. You just are. And then you're behind the 8 ball going, how am I going to replace this person? Why? I thought we were loyal to you. But if you were really aligned with what mattered to them, then you would know. And you'd have transparency, you'd have a contingency plan, you'd be planning ahead. Like there would be,
you would know that when they were leaving. Yeah, I mean, they would tell you, right?
They would tell you, and be great. You could celebrate with them. It wouldn't be a surprise. And that's just, to me, really the game changer. And the way that I learned about this is after I quit my Wall Street job, I went on a semester at sea. at 25, which was quite a unique experience because I was on that trip with about 700 undergrads. And so I was mama bear, right? They're all like, the world is full of possibility. And I'm going like, don't graduate. Like, it's awful. But what was really cool is actually that semester, there was a social enterprise incubator that was traveling with us called the Unreasonable Institute. And so they were doing Unreasonable at Sea, and they were bringing mentors on the boat to work with the entrepreneurs who were going through that incubation cycle in real time. So like we'd park it in Hong Kong, and somebody would get on, like the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and somebody would get off, like the guy who invented Google Glass. And then it just the whole time was like that. So one of the people that I met was this really incredible entrepreneur, Jeff Hoffman, who was one of the founders of Priceline. And he did a fireside chat where he was talking about leadership throughout all of his companies. And he's been very prolific and successful in many different industries. And he was telling us a story about loyalty and what it really meant to be a leader. And he's like, you have to know what your people care about, what's on their mind. And so he told us this like vignette of this guy, I'm going to call him Joe. Joe, I guess, was one of their high performers. And all of a sudden, a couple weeks were going by and he was just slipping. He like looked tired. He wasn't, completing things on time, blah, 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 blah. And so Jeff pulled him into his office, and instead of sort of berating him and, like getting mad, he was like, dude, like you've always been a high performer. What is up? Because, we need you. Like we can't afford to not have you. And it turns out that Joe's mom's was going through like almost eviction. Her house was being foreclosed because she couldn't afford to pay, her mortgage or whatever. And so every extra dollar he made went to her. He's like being on math and trying to refinance with her constantly. And so he was just really stressed out in his personal life and not able to give his full focus at work. And Jeff was like, okay, that's what matters the most to you right now? And he said, yeah, it's on my mind all the time. So he said, okay, you know what? That's okay. We're going to embrace it. We're not going to like ignore it and just tell Joe to like work harder and what we're going to own it as a team because we're a family. Like we have loyalty to you, right? So the next week he decided to make the company's theme that week Joe's mom's house. And they had fundraisers and they had a bake sale and they did like all these really cool things to let Joe know, hey, we're here and we're with you. Here's some resources to alleviate some of that stress in your personal life. You can show up here again with whatever, energy you have, right? And maximize that while you're here. And that, I mean, isn't that amazing? Like Joe's mom's house week, like who does that? And what was crazy to me is he said because of that platinum lever of loyalty and leadership, he never once, not once, had anyone quit in any of the startups that he's been a part of. And to me, that was just like mind blowing, and something worth investigating and maybe replicating. So yeah, the platinum levers of loyalty are getting rid of your ego and humbly understanding that everybody's on their own journey. And that if you really want people's loyalty, you have to care about what they care about. And you have to align their work with what matters to them so that they're coming to work, not just for you or for their salary, but for themselves.
How do you know as an employee, let's say you go through your program and you put all this together and you know where you want to go and you really you've crystallized it in your brain and you know what you're doing. How do you know when you found the right company?
Oh, okay. So
what should I look for? Like what am I looking for? I mean, I'm a big believer in trusting your gut, but it's got to go beyond that, right? Like, how do you understand?
So the sixth step in the nth degree is called navigate. And this is where my design thinking study from Semester at Sea kicked in. It was the one of the biggest fears that I heard from people was I'm going to do all this work, I'm going to figure out my niche, and then I'm just going to land somewhere where the grass is not any greener. The grass is brown and ugly, just like it was where I was before. And I'm going to hate it, and I'm going to have gone all in, and I might as well just stayed where I was. Like I hear that all the time.
Right.
And with design thinking, the idea is if you're going to create a program or a product or something, maybe the smartest way to do it is not to go all in and spend all the money and do all the R&D and have this final product only to then test it and see if it's viable and people want to buy it, right? Maybe the smarter thing to do is put out these mini ideations and prototypes and iterations of the final product and get feedback in real time. And then once you've got 99% of the way there, then you put all the money and the, investment behind the final product. And I thought, okay, if that could work for a product or a program, could it work for somebody's career? Could it work for somebody's life? And it turns out it does, actually. The two of the guys who teach this at Stanford created a whole process called Design Your Life, and they wrote a book about it. And there's a course at Stanford you can take if you want to, where they teach it. And the idea is you leverage what in design thinking is creating empathy for the problem, and then rapidly ideating solutions. And then based on your most viable solutions, creating prototypes, like minimum viable prototypes of your final outcome or product or whatever. And then you test them, you put them out in the world. And as you get feedback, you then iterate new solutions, changes to the prototypes. And you do that by gaining more empathy, and sort of the whole process starts over again, right? So I think that that you've landed in the right place only when you've given it a test drive and put out into the world some sort of minimum viable version of it to inspect what you expect, to investigate your decision, There's some super easy ways to do this. Shadowing is one of them. So if you are like last stages of interview or whatever, and you've done all your Google research and you've looked on Glassdoor and you've done informational interview, you owe it to yourself to go and sit in that office for half a day or a full day and spend some time with somebody who's doing what you're going to be doing, and see if it doesn't make you want to blow your brain, sitting there for half a day is exhausting. That's going to be your full day every day. You could easily dodge a bullet just by showing up there for half a day, and then you're just out half a day instead of maybe 2 years of your life because you want your resume to look fluffy or whatever, right?
I think it's wise to say. I think you can also say that, right? I think you can say, I want to spend a day in the office with someone.
100%.
I think that's a completely 100%. Fair thing to say. That's part of, I'm interviewing you too, right? And I want to know, I want to see. I think that's a completely fair thing to do.
And the only reason people don't do it is fear, right? I don't want to be wrong. I want job search to be over. I want my full-time job. I'm tired of this. And so I'm going to skip the last steps of investigation, right? And I'll tell you what, I did that. I've done that before. The reason I'm a career coach and a career strategy expert is not because I'm 50 years old and salty vet and I did everything right. It's because I'm 32 and somehow I made every bad decision you can make professionally by the time I was 27. And then some more of them after, And so from my own experience, I can tell you that not doing that minimum amount of research, like going to the office or seeing how many coworkers are going to be in your space, or having a really strategic conversation with somebody who's going to be in leadership towards you, and asking them what their expectations are, like things like that resulted in huge bad outcomes for me. Like there was a job that I had in between leaving Wall Street and starting my business where I got fired because it was just a horrible fit, and I was too afraid to ask some of those critical questions and too afraid to not have insurance and a 401. Those are legitimate fears if you literally can't take care of yourself. But if you have any other strings to pull on, it's worth waiting another week or 2 weeks or even a month or whatever to land in the right job than to be in the wrong job for 3 months and get fired, which was, again, my experience. So I will humbly offer that as hopefully a cautionary tale.
I've always thought like you could learn so much from like going to work with a couple of the people that you're going to be working with, right? and just listening to the conversation around the table. I think that can tell you everything you probably need to know about working for that company.
Yep. So that's what I would offer you. You know, you're in the right place when you've investigated it, and you can see yourself living there. You know, you can see yourself doing the 9 to 5 and showing up and having coffee and driving there every day. And like, if you can see it because you've investigated it, I think you're going to make a good decision.
Well, thank you so much. And we did not even get into talking about the book. That means I'm just going to have you back at some other point. But we're getting up here on an hour.
Good to me, man. The book comes out in September, so maybe that's better timing. Yeah.
But thanks for spending some time with us today out there in the audience. It's been a real pleasure to have you. Hope you learned what you wanted to learn, and you got something really good from this conversation. Now, how can they get in touch with you, Tracy, and work with you? How does that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So we went ahead and created a landing page for viewers of this show specifically. So if you go to tracytimm.com, so TracyTimm.com/power lunch, then you will find all kinds of goodies there. So specifically, if you want to get in touch with me, we offer free 50-minute clarity strategy calls where we can get you unstuck and you can learn more about our programs and our services around career clarity. We've got 2 really incredible breakthrough programs that we're running right now that we've had an incredible January enrolling people into. You can also find some free resources there as well. There's a great download for the 4 places to find your dream job. There's a really cool masterclass on the 5-step will take you to get unstuck. And there's a ton of other, links to blog posts and resources that are right there at your disposal. So tracytimm.com/power lunch is where you want to go. And if you want to connect with us on social, LinkedIn, I'm just Tracy Timm. It's like .in/Tracy Timm, I think. And then our Instagram is at Journey to Your Dream Job, and it's brand new. So go over there, give us a like, give us a follow, and come see what we're putting out there.
If you could put those links on the feed, that would be great. The ones where you want to direct people, because I think that would help people. They can go right from the feed to it. If you or I can do that either way. I think we should post them. I think that would be helpful for everybody.
Sounds great.
Now, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. You can find out more about our upcoming schedule. Tomorrow, let's see who I've got tomorrow. I've got Dr. Melanie Katzman on the program tomorrow, so please join us tomorrow at noon Eastern Standard Time on the Power Lunch. You can look at the upcoming schedule for February, and March is starting to fill up at powerlunch.live. And we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, do some good stuff out there.